Welcome back to Uprising. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar. It's very rare to see rock, punk, and other forms of music dominated in the mainstream by white musicians and white consumers of music to acknowledge the roots of their favorite tradition. It is rarer still to admit that there are young black and brown artists creating and enjoying punk rock. Hollywood stereotypes always place African American youth in situations where hip hop or R&B is their musical tradition of choice. Now, a young indie filmmaker wants to change that. Donovan Crony has imagined a 25-minute film called Anarchy Nowadays that he hopes will change the narrative. On his crowdfunding page, he describes the film's synopsis like this. Several groups of young POC, people of color rockers, take on their individual challenges of life as they inevitably all cross each other's path at the biggest punk house show ever. Love, heartbreak, art, education, annihilation. These rockers are trying to figure out life and how to live it. Donovan Crony is the director of the film, and he now joins me. Welcome to Uprising.
Hello, good morning.
Thanks so much for joining us. Well, where did the idea for Anarchy Nowadays come from? It's still in the very early stages. You've shot just a few minutes to give your crowdfunding supporters a sense of what the film will be, but it's not the kind of typical Hollywood project, let's say.
It's definitely coming from what I know from my time growing up as a kid. I got into punk rock really early, and it's just something that I'm not seeing in the mainstream Hollywood movies. This kind of perspective from young black and brown youth, and yeah, I just thought it's about time for somebody to do it. And I was like, I should probably do that.
And actually, tell our audience how popular punk rock, rock and roll is among black and brown youth. If you just tune into the radio, into commercial radio, you hear almost entirely white bands, usually white male bands, a few white women thrown in there, and the listenership to those stations is assumed to be largely white.
Right. Well, it's that ability to distribute images as well as audio, obviously, but it's kind of taken over that aesthetic that rock and roll is predominantly white, and that's where I really feel like my ability as a filmmaker comes in to create more images, to more high quality images, to really put forth these bands that are composed primarily of people of color, and that's what I'm really excited about with the film.
Now, often when Hollywood does depict black youth in the context of music, it's rap or hip hop. Brown youth, Latin American youth might be listening to Latin rock or traditional Mexican music or whatever whatever Hollywood dishes up to us. But this in the film that you're hoping to put together, Anarchy Nowadays, is it set within a sort of small town scenario?
Yes, I think yeah, the atmosphere is that feeling. I'm from Bakersfield, California, but I grew up primarily in Las Vegas. So within the context of those two places, they're not particularly small towns, but I definitely had that feeling amongst the scene of kids and going to shows. So it'll have that air, but it'll be set for the most part in Southern California. So I'm in Long Beach right now, and I kind of love the community here, and the feeling when I go to shows here is very much like everyone is learning, and that's what I'm really interested in, is kind of like this, going to shows, meeting people, hearing bands, whether they're local or whether they're touring and you've never heard them or seen them before. It's kind of like this interesting learning process that I'm into as far as rock and roll is concerned.
What is your goal in how you want to depict your characters in Anarchy Nowadays? Our general, when we read the news, especially over the last year, what we hear about when in connection with black youth in particular in the news, is yet another child or young person or teen or someone in the early 20s gunned down by police or a vigilante.
Right, exactly. I need to show within this film not only a spectacular, well-written story, but I want to show growth. I really, when I see black and brown youth shown in films or shown in just the news, like you said, it's that narrative, and I really need to change that by showing growth and the acknowledgement of growth. There's so many times in my life, in my young life, where I've acknowledged moments, interactions between people that have kind of like changed me, and I don't really see that within films based around black and brown youth. It's usually, maybe you'll have the hip hop film where the drug dealer stops selling drugs or something happens to him that's super traumatic, and then they kind of grow from that. But still, ultimately, it's this is really painful experience. Not only that you kind of feel from the character, but just from the film, and you walk out just with this kind of a feeling. And I'm so over that, and I need to. I understand that film needs conflict, and that's kind of what drives a film, and maybe even drives people to go and sit in a theater and watch a film. But there's so many other films that I love that have been a little bit more experimental with that and are just as powerful and can really put forth this kind of changing, ever like fluid story, and that's what I want to show.
I'm wondering if you've heard of the controversy around Star Wars, the new Star Wars film, because it happens to depict a realistic version of the demographics represented on screen. There's some bizarre white supremacist group that is boycotting the film because they are claiming it puts forth white genocide because the stormtroopers are black.
Yeah, incredible, incredible. Um, it's just unfortunate and just sad overall. So
I mean, how many decades of films have people of color had to watch with zero characters that look like us?
forever, forever. Yeah, there's such this kind of weird agenda behind that. I work in the industry. I've worked in the industry ever since the beginning. It's just felt like I'm stepping into their aesthetic, and I was just unwanted as a creative person, and we just kind of have to make our own space, And this film is about that. It's about making your own emotional, mental, spiritual space for the characters, and also just in the set too. I make an effort to hire people of color behind the camera. I make an effort to hire women, to run the camera, to run equipment, um, and not just put people of color in front of the camera and say go, and we'll edit you up and chop you up and then put you out there. It's not about that. It's a more collaborative effort.
What you're saying is reminding me of the conversation between Matt Damon and Effie Brown. It's also reminding me of what Ava DuVernay has said repeatedly, which is if the institutions don't welcome us, we will create our own institutions. And so, as an indie filmmaker, you are taking on the very challenging task of making an independently funded short film. And you are calling on people who believe in that work to support you. Tell us a little bit about this crowdfunding venture.
So yeah, this has been a learning experience. It's been amazing. It's been such an incredible feeling to almost kind of take the risk of really working on something that is truly ours, instead of I've worked in the industry, but I've also been doing freelance for the longest time, and it can be such an exhausting mode of living to kind of like rely on someone else's money and to survive and to create and things like that. But with this, it's more of a community effort, and I really feel that. I feel like I'm 24/7 working on getting the word out for this film, and expanding the film. People are asking questions like, what is it? I want to know more. I want to know more about the characters. And so that's kind of gone into this crowdfunding adventure, and it's more than just raising money for me now. It's about the community, and I really want people to be a part of it, and I've just reached out everywhere. The rock and roll community, outside the hip hop community, has been super supportive. Um, yeah, it's about that. Just coming together and making it bigger than just kind of doing it on my own. And yeah,
So at this point, you've created a concept trailer that you've posted to your Indiegogo page, and you hope your final project to be a 25-minute film that you would submit to film festivals.
exactly. Yeah, it's gonna be around 25 minutes. It's the trailer that becomes the short film that maybe through putting it through a run of film festivals and things like that could possibly become a feature. Um, but yeah, that's kind of the route that we're going right now.
Explain the title, Anarchy Nowadays.
Yeah, okay, so it's a little, I felt like it was kind of multi-layered in that, you know, the anarchy part kind of being without like a master, without a ruler or a master, and also kind of like the how life can be chaotic, how especially being young in today's world, how it can be so um, chaotic inside one's head, inside oneself, and kind of being this like internal struggle as well as external, as well as constantly being barraged by images of like powerful whiteness, Avengers, or just in the news of being constantly slaughtered on the street. Um, so that's where the anarchy comes in, and that's happening right now. It's been happening, but it's really just kind of elevated in today's media because of just the world and technology and all that.
Finally, Donovan, I want to ask you to comment on the challenges that young um, artists, filmmakers of color like yourself face. I mean, myself as a journalist of color, I personally know the the way to success is who you know, and if you're not already hooked into money and circles with money and networks with money and the people that are going to put their financial and financial weight behind you and their reputation behind you, then you struggle twice as hard to get the recognition that is generally handed on a plate to people just as qualified or less qualified even than you are. And I know that feeling. I've been there. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that as an indie filmmaker. The amount of money you're trying to raise is $20,000. That's pocket change to people in Hollywood that could lose that much money and not even realize it. And so, it's a tough world out there. So I'm wondering if you can comment on that.
Exactly, Sonali. It's about that. It's about for my entire life. It's about being seen. It's about being able to see yourself within the world, and that is possible through film. That's been my philosophy, is that film has throughout all of its years been able to kind of shape and transform culture in order to propagate its agenda to whatever you want to say that is right now, which is kind of obvious to me. But yeah, it's about being seen, and a lot of these youth now are just not seeing themselves in other paths, in other avenues of life. Like being able to be a part of rock and roll has allowed me to kind of free up myself creatively and do and try all of these different platforms of creating. And if we're not seeing ourselves constantly, like white men are constantly seeing themselves as superheroes and these powerful figures all the time, every week, a major $200 million film is coming out. If we're not constantly doing that, yeah, it's gonna be a really hard time, and or continue to be a really hard time.
Donovan, give out the Indiegogo page for where people can support your project.
The URL is igg.me/at/Anarchy Nowadays.
We'll post that to uprisingwithsonali.com. I'm assuming people can also do a Google search for Indiegogo Anarchy Nowadays, and they'll probably find it.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Best of luck to you.
Thank you so much, Nali.
My guest is Donovan Crony. He is the director of the forthcoming film Anarchy Nowadays. And actually, let's go out with some of the music and dialogue from the concept trailer of Anarchy Nowadays. This is Uprising. We'll be back in a minute.
The punks in this town are just trying to be heard. I was really fortunate to find something that I love doing. Hopefully I get to do it forever, you know?
Just trying to get out of this town. Tired of seeing the same people, the same shows.